some of these emails, hoping that everybody's back. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have kind of a combined session tonight. I'm going to do a little bit of the financial aid piece, and I know we've got some financial aid experts on this in this group as well, so that will be exciting. We'll have a little bit of a discussion. I want it to be more discussion based, not just me being a talking head. And then toward the end of it, after we finish that little bit, then Jody and I are going to launch you into your goal setting. So, and thinking about how you as teams are going to be establishing your goals for your SEM plan. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about that, and then you'll have some time as your teams to kind of talk about those. We'll kind of nudge you at the beginning, but then we'll give you time together as teams to work on those goals and really think about what you're going to do for your goals. Jody, anything from you that you'd like to comment on?
You got it covered. I was making the joke
Hey.
about all that circle back in 2025. Guess what? It's circling back time.
It's circling back, and hopefully it doesn't circle back and hit you right in the head or something. So, okay, I'm going to get started. I'm going to pull up my, oops. Can you turn on sharing, please? Okay, try again. Ah, there we go. Thank you. Okay. Hey, I don't know what it was doing there. Let me stop. Find out.
There's a really nice picture
Share.
of look like the redwood forest. It's pretty.
That's better.
That's
All
it.
right, let me get it to presentation. Everybody see this okay? You're seeing the
Yes.
right slides?
Yep.
Okay, great. So, um, as part of what was put in path, you had a short course that I developed several years ago with Stephen McDowell on the registrar's office and financial aid, and kind of it's something that we've used not just for this course, but we've also just presented it and had it out there available for individuals who wanted in any kind of professional development, and really talking specifically about the intersection between those two offices with respect to financial aid. It probably needs to be updated a little bit, but it was something that we had out there. Let me let Leslie in. Okay. But
I got it
what
all.
I would like to do tonight is really elevate that from not just the financial aid perspective, but really more into an enrollment leader perspective. And then toward the end of this discussion, I also included some things. I did a presentation recently, a training session for a group of folks in Colorado, and it was based on a book called The Courageous Follower. And so whenever I find some leadership related topics, I always like to sprinkle those in and share those, because obviously that's a passion for me, but also wanting to make sure that you're getting the benefit of all different kinds of a leadership experience. We want this not just to be totally focused in the SEM world, but also how talking more broadly about leadership. So that's where we are headed tonight. Let's see if I can get my, uh, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to move all of you so I can see this. So when we think about this, this is a definition that was given by Don Hostler from University of Indiana. Obviously a very prolific writer in the area of STEM, and he's talking about really how are you strategically using financial aid and how that's become an integral part of enrollment management strategies. For a long time it was so recruitment focused that there wasn't as much emphasis on the financial aid piece, but more and more we're seeing that financial aid, and for the past many years, financial aid has really been a key tool that has been available. So this is just review. This was in the course as well, but I wanted to, just show this diagram about the types of aid. Obviously, those packages are developed with scholarships and grants, and those grants are both state and federal and institutional. And then you've got your loans, and then your what we call self-help, which is your work, your family support, any savings. But when we think about this, really, the only area where enrollment leaders have any kind of influence is really in this first bucket, whether it be scholarships, if you have a large scholarship portfolio, and then also other types of institutional aid, whether it be institutional grants or others. So as you're thinking about that, what leverage do you have in helping students or helping to move the needle with enrollment? What is it that you're doing and working with individuals on your campus in order to bolster that this part of the aid package so that really you can utilize it to influence your enrollment? So I just want to pause for a minute. I want this to be discussion, so feel free to come off mute. And any comments on this area? Have you had a lot of experience in working with these tools to help enrollment?
Hey man, I don't have much experience with financial aid at all. This is one of my weakest points of knowledge when it comes to enrollment management. I do know that the importance of financial aid, especially in yielding your incoming class and using that as a recruitment tool ahead of confirmation deadlines. So I've seen it on the periphery being used at my institution, but having some more hands-on experience, I'm a little bit more limited.
That's thank you, Brianna. That's really interesting because for years and years I considered financial aid the third rail, and I wanted to stay away from it, and I was kind of thrust into it and when I took on an interim role while I was registrar, and I found that it was really kind of a great thing. I one thing I really enjoyed about it, coming from the registrar side, I said no a lot in my job. And so this was a way I got to say yes about some things. And so it made me really happy to be able to say yes to some students and try to help problem solve in that way. But one thing I will say is with respect to institutions, many institutions are really kind of trying to be much more creative in this financial aid world, and not just if they have the resources, and that's a big caveat. If they have the resources, not just relying on the federal minimums for Pell eligibility, but bumping those minimums up for let's say a family of four. I know the University of Michigan and it's probably one of the initial leaders in this area where they would say we're going to meet a need for anyone with a family of four income of 65,000. That was their minimum when they first started their program. I think they have bumped that up even higher. And so really being able to help supplement, because we know that those federal minimums had remained terribly low for a long time. And especially when you're thinking about now and the impacts of inflation and other things, they're really quite low. And so if there's institutional aid that can be there to help bridge more of those gaps so that learners can enroll at your institution. But that can be really challenging, especially, I work a lot with community colleges, and their portfolio for scholarships or portfolio for this type of institutional aid may not be as robust. Any other comments?
Yeah, we actually have uh, some additional resources now that we've been allotted through state and local.
So Johnny
Did
did
he freeze?
indicate, Yeah, he'd indicated in the chat that he's been having some issues. He's on campus.
Oh,
He's having issues. So he said he might, yep, and he's frozen. So
okay. Well, darn. I was curious. I wanted to hear more about that. One thing you are seeing is, states in some areas are really putting more emphasis in this, especially to help certain populations of students. I know, the Mass Reconnect in Massachusetts that's providing free community college for adult learners. Some of those other things, those tools where states are even seeing the need, excuse me, to provide more resources. So I'll keep going.
Tammy, can I mention something?
Oh, yes, please.
I
Please,
know,
please.
and I will not try to jump in first because this is my strong suit, Brianna. One thing I'm finally really good at, as a financial aid director. But I've noticed that some states have been requiring high school students to file their FAFSAs. There have, I work in the South Bronx, and when I got here, there was like this big deal about, well, students aren't filing their FAFSAs and they don't answer emails. And I didn't understand that. What do you mean students aren't taking a few steps to get free monies, essentially, when you think about Pell Grants? But it was the reality. So I think another part of that issue was that the enrollment management team kind of put financial aid on the back burner. It was like, okay, we get the class in, and then once they're here, then you work on helping us retain them and helping us make sure that they get financially cleared. And I've been having this conversation, particularly since I've started here at Ascend. I've been having this conversation about, hey, why don't you give me a list of all the students that you accept as you accept them? And then I can do outreach via email and text message and create a kind of a caseload for each of my financial aid counselors to proactively get these students to file their state applications and their federal applications. And then they can make an informed decision about if they can actually commit because they know what their awards are. Oddly enough, I still haven't gotten that list. But all that to say that there are opportunities in the financial aid office to aid enrollment, trying to get the attention of the enrollment management can be a challenge because I see them as being a bit myopic when it comes to the impact that financial aid has. And the last thing I want to say is at the end of every semester, I have some discretionary funds that I award to about 100 students. I do it on my own. I identify the students that have need and that they have a balance and they have a hold on their account and they can't register, pay the balances, tell my bursar to lift the hold, and then I send an email to these students to say, hey, Merry Christmas, I'm the Director of Financial Aid. Your hold has been removed, now you can register. And I do it on my own, but 100 students for me at my campus, that's almost 2 to 3% when you think about retaining from semester to semester.
That is absolutely fabulous. Now, I love the proactive nature of it. I love, because being able to outreach to a student who's already expressed interest. They applied, they've already expressed interest in your institution, but then helping them with those kitchen table conversations about affordability and what can we do, and not waiting, because oftentimes, as you said, we kind of sit back and we wait for the students to apply for that aid and say, well, we don't want to, we don't want to push it on them, or we know it's kind of difficult to do, or they'll find it, or that everybody knows about it. So I love the fact that you're doing that. And the whole piece about being able to help with the persistence piece for those continuing students who have those smaller balances, then that extra nudge to help them be able to register for the next term, or even even if they are previously registered and still have that balance, that they can know that they can continue on. Thank you so much. That's great.
Tammy,
And oftentimes we're not talking large dollar amounts either to make those differences. Yeah, Jody, please.
right, just because I know it's hard, you can't see the chat and see everyone, but Johnny is back. He did drop something into the chat that he was trying to say, but if he's stable, he might be able to speak to what he dropped in the chat. It sounds like he has a wonderful opportunity on his hands.
Yes, please, Johnny.
Yes, I'll try to get it out before it falls out again. Essentially, we have a bunch of money available for students that we're able to give away. We left some money on the table the last couple of years. We weren't able to give it all away for students who live in the county, in the state, and through one local politician's resources. If you live in a certain neighborhood or zip code, you have access to that money as well. So you can actually double dip that because it's not income based, it's not based on any other resources, it's based solely on where you live. So there's several opportunities for students and potential students to take advantage of all of this money that's going to be available over the next few years, at least, probably beyond. So we've been definitely having huge efforts to try to promote and use that money to leverage, in our recruitment efforts. And we actually saw a huge impact this past academic year where the previous, so this past fall, we awarded roughly 1,500 students with scholarships, where compared to the previous year where we were leaving money on the table, we may be awarded something like 200 students because there wasn't a lot of information out there about it. And we weren't doing a good job with leveraging it then. But this past year, we bumped it something like from 200 all the way up to 1,500 students were awarded this free money. And so, that campaign is continuing this year.
That's fabulous. That is really great. So I love the fact that you're being able you're doing some analysis, and this went back to that whole data piece, doing some analysis and finding that we're leaving money on the table. So what can we do about that? So if your financial aid area, those of you who are not in financial aid, as enrollment leaders, you need to make sure that you're having those regular reviews of the money that gets left on the table. And some of that is in your scholarship area, because your donor agreements might be so narrowly focused that it's difficult for you to award those monies. It might be, you need brown-eyed, males from this particular high school, or, I'm being a little silly about that, but it can be difficult. So working then as you do that analysis and say, we're having trouble finding students who meet the criteria for this. And then going back to your foundation and say, can we maybe contact the donors? Can you contact the donors? See if we can renegotiate the requirements for this scholarship that would then open it up a little bit more so that we can utilize the money, because people donate money for scholarships because they want it to be used for students, but sometimes they don't understand how difficult it is to find students for that. And then secondly, with respect to that, also, if there are any barriers that you have that are requiring students, whether it's in the donor agreements or just your process, that require students to apply for different types of scholarships, oftentimes, if you can talk to them and say, maybe we can just auto award these based on the data that we have and the analysis that we do, and remove that barrier of the application from the student and be able to auto award, then you see a better utilization of those scholarship dollars. Plus, it really helps students so they don't have to hunt and find specific scholarship opportunities. So I'm going to kind of move on from here. So we've already talked about this one, so I'll go on to the next one. I want to talk a little bit about discount rate. This is one that is very much a bone of a hot topic and a bone of contention, especially politically out in the landscape. Now, this data is a little bit old. It's 22-23. I didn't pull the latest on there. I probably should have before I did this. But as you can see, the discount rate has been climbing over these many years. And so, anybody know what discount rate is?
Yeah, it's essentially the rate that the institution agrees to essentially charge students from what the normal tuition rate would be. They essentially agree to effectively reduce their tuition for certain populations, I believe. Or maybe I guess it kind of depends, but essentially they lower the price so that to make college at their institution more affordable.
Right. So they've got the regular sticker price that you might see out there. And you see this a lot in private institutions. So I include this even if you're not particularly at a private institution currently, your career might lead you to a private institution. And so you really need to know what's going on, especially in the entire enrollment management landscape, so that if you decide to go to a private institution, and this is, like I said, it's coming under some scrutiny, but basically your discount rate is the total institutional grant aid awarded to undergrads by the colleges and university as a percentage of the total gross tuition and fee revenue. So if you wanted to calculate, now this is not federal aid, it's not, those federal dollars are not included in your discount rate. This is your institutional aid. So let's say the sticker price for an elite private institution is $100,000. But for certain populations of students, we're going to discount that by providing scholarship dollars to them, or institutional aid that brings their cost down to, let's say, $30,000 as opposed to the full $100,000 sticker price. And so basically what that does, it can be a little deceiving for some students, especially some that aren't as familiar, and families that aren't as familiar with how these things are working. It happens that and you maybe at a public institution, somebody might come to you and says, well, but the University of X is giving me a $30,000 scholarship. But then you talk to them and you say, but wait a minute, what's their overall cost of attendance? And then how does that factor into what you're doing? And so what we're seeing is students, especially this generation of students and families, love to use these try to use these as bargaining tools to get you to try to up your financial aid award that you can give them. But also it requires a lot of education. And so as you're thinking about how you're having those conversations, whether it's in the admissions office or in your financial aid counselors, how you're having those conversations with individuals, if you're not at a private school that's doing that kind of discounting, but really helping the students, the enrollees, the applicants, really compare apples to apples with respect to their award that they're getting, whether from a complete award. But I will say this is something that is, like I said, has come under some scrutiny. And so, especially as that discount rate has continued to climb and climb and climb. And it really, when you're looking at it from an enrollment management's perspective, and when you're one that's trying to make that bottom line with respect to tuition dollars and the revenues that you need to bring in, keeping your discount rate as low as possible is more beneficial. Plus, it's a little bit, in my opinion, a little more truth in advertising. Any comments about discount rate? Is this something that you've heard of before, that you've worked with before? Yeah, Amy, please.
as you were talking, I was like, oh, this is what our institution does. We're a private institution, but it's interesting because we have kind of a mixed model. So there's the tuition setting side of things where we discount mostly in our graduate level programs, where we say, okay, it's a 50%, 45% discount to be able to be competitive with some of our other institutions. And so the sticker price is our full tuition rate, but then we say, okay, this particular program or these programs are then 50% discounted. And then we have other institutional aid available to them through scholarships and whatnot. But it becomes really confusing. One of the challenges that we've had is sometimes students look at that sticker price and then they don't bother, because it's like, okay, you're a lot more than other institutions. So we've been in the last 3 years doing an analysis and review, looking at other tuition models out there, as well as our financial aid, to say, what do we need to be doing? How can we change that? Because I realize some of that is in the marketing, but at the same time, what ended up happening for us is we ended up discounting so many programs and we lost some of the standardization, that we were spending a lot of hours and work trying to even program that into our Elysian banner system. So it's been one of those areas as registrar that I've been more involved with, because we tie tuition to the courses. And so my team has been involved in that process, and it's been really challenging and complex.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate that. It's really good to have that real world experience in this. All right, I'm going to keep going. So I talked a little bit about that especially the private school discounting increase and how that changes a little bit the landscape in the sector, the higher education sector, because of those conversations, those impacts that it might have on you. So let's talk a little bit about financial aid leveraging. This is something that was introduced really a lot by Noel Levitz before they became Ruffalo Noel Levitz. This is something where there was a lot of work doing, saying, okay, how can we not over award certain populations of students? How do we utilize our institutional dollars, whether those be scholarships or institutional grants? How do we use them to incentivize enrollment just enough, pay students just enough in this in order to get them to enroll, but so we can spread out the dollars more across our entire population and get the biggest bang for that financial aid buck. And so this is something that, as an enrollment leader, you might be having experience with leveraging models. You may have, we had one when I was at the University of Wyoming. We actually had it developed by an economics faculty member on campus who developed the model. And let me tell you, it was a great model and it worked really, really well. Actually worked too well, because we blew through our institutional budget pretty quickly, because we really hit that sweet spot for those students, especially out-of-state students who were wanting to enroll. And it was one where we had to rethink that leveraging model because we didn't have the resources to support it, but it certainly worked as designed as far as incentivizing enrollment, but we got to a point where we had overspent our budget. Any comments on leveraging?
Tammy, I probably have more of a question. This is, I previously worked at a private institution and we had an outside agency that worked on the strategy around discounts and leveraging financial aid to entice students to enroll. And you just, it's one of those things that I want to learn more about, how I can be more effective and strategic using this kind of tool. And you know, when you said an economics professor, I was like, yeah, that makes so much sense to me. I used to wonder why at my last institution, why we were paying this agency when we had a really prestigious economics department. But I am curious about how I learn the ins and outs of this, because I would imagine that my understanding of tuition discounts and leveraging aid is you don't necessarily have that money. You're just discounting by giving them scholarships that doesn't necessarily represent real money that the institution has. I'd imagine that they're projecting what they're going to need for their operational costs, and of course, they want to protect that.
And
And
a lot depends, it could be two ways. You could be doing what you call foregone revenue, meaning that you're just reducing the cost knowing that you're not going to get the revenue. So that would be like waiver authority. The other one, some areas actually have it backed by real dollars. So whether those dollars are coming from a financial aid fee that might go out to all students that they're paying into, and so then those dollars go into this bucket that you can use for leveraging. So it depends. That's an institutional commitment or decision as to whether you want to use waiver authority, which is we're waiving a portion of the tuition dollars, or whether you're actually backing it with real dollars. And sometimes those real dollars can be donor funded dollars if you've got a strong foundation or endowment that you can use for, let's say, need-based aid or other types of things that is not tied specifically to certain requirements. You may have some leverage in using those dollars, but also making sure that so that's where you work really, really closely with your CFO to see, okay, what target are we trying to hit? And what are we using real dollars or are we using waiver authority? And if we're using waiver, making sure that we don't over award. And so that's where the data comes in based on looking at where that sweet spot is with respect to your financial aid packages and triggering enrollment. And that's where these entities like Ruffalo No Levitz that you're paying them to do, they've got this algorithm, which is kind of a black box. You don't get to see what they're putting into all those. They're asking you for your data, they're crunching all the numbers, they're spitting it back to you, but you don't always get to see that. But yet, if you have the ability to use someone in-house, then you have access to all that, everything that goes in behind it, and you're helping to co-create that particular model and then test it. And there are times that you can test it in maybe with smaller groups so that you're not over enrolling. Maybe you're doing it with certain populations, but knowing full well that you're doing 4-year awards. And so if you blow through a budget and you over enroll, that means that those students are with you for 4 years. You're not just doing it as a one-time award. You're living with that, and you're having to make adjustments to that model for future years, but you still got to, if you're a 4-year institution, you're living with that decision throughout their entire undergraduate, normally 8 semesters worth of aid. But you can also, Ruffalo No Levitz has some good books that you can read about it, even though they won't tell you the secret sauce. You can at least get a good background on what they're doing with respect to utilizing this and the financial aid leveraging. They have a good book. And I have a copy of it, not right here in front of me, but I can certainly get that to Jonica and let you know what that is and put it in the resources. Okay.
thank you. I would love to know what's behind the curtain.
Yeah, they won't tell you everything, but they might tell you a little bit so you can get some ideas there. Okay, so I've talked a little bit in this case about you using data, using that research. You might use admitted student surveys. These are always, you get low response rates. Those are admitted but didn't enroll. And you might ask them, was it your financial aid package? Is that why you did? Was it lack of resources that caused you caused you not to enroll? Like I said, contracting with outside parties. I keep this in there, even though we're past the COVID years. But if you're looking at long-term data, you need to make sure that you take into account those HERF monies, because that can skew the results. If you were giving lots of money through HERF dollars that you had through COVID, you may not have those additional resources to pour into your leveraging model to be able to use that. If you have an in-house researching team or in-house expertise, that's in my opinion, that's the best to use, because you do have access to that model itself. So I'm going to quickly get through this because I want to make sure we have time for the rest of it. I want to talk a little bit about cost of attendance, and there is kind of this tug of war that we're seeing out there. Some areas want you to show a higher cost of attendance that allows students to qualify for more loans, and other areas, whether it be your state or your governing boards, want to keep the cost of attendance low to attract more price sensitive students and families. And also this game that's being played with cost of attendance is under more scrutiny. I keep athletic departments in here. Now, this is obviously not taking into account NIL money or for those really big players in the athletic landscape, those big Power 5 conferences and schools. I'm really talking more about those institutions that are not playing in the NIL game as much, and still trying to get enough resources for athletes to be able to pay athletes. If you're keeping your cost of attendance low, sometimes you'll get pressure from athletic departments to bump that up a little bit so that they can provide higher scholarship dollars for their student athletes. So as an enrollment leader, talking about those competing forces, how do you manage those competing priorities on your campus, whether it be cost of attendance issues, whether it be looking at what you're using with respect to your leveraging model, or if you're doing leveraging, how you're using your scholarship dollars. How do you manage those competing priorities? Anybody want to share anything in that respect? Okay, I won't put you on the spot, but knowing full well that you're going to have those where you have pressures from different entities, that's something you're going to have that you're going to hear about. So I want to just bring up quickly the FAFSA delay. Obviously, that did affect enrollment leaders. And so how did your institution, if you were the enrollment leader, what would you have recommended to help mitigate those effects on the late FAFSA data? Do you have institutional aid that you could say, yeah, we think these students are going to qualify for this? I know some did the CSS profile through College Board, and they used the information on CSS profile to help them determine. Now, that's another thing that your students have to fill out, so that could be another barrier for your students. But I know institutions some of them did use that in order to predict the aid that the student was going to get. They filled it in with institutional dollars and this helped to bridge that until the other dollars came in. So think about that. So now for something completely different. For those of you who are Monty Python fans, I had to include this one. Maybe that just shows how old I am. I love Monty Python. So this is a book that I discovered, and I apologize if you've been in one of my sessions before where I talked about this particular book, but I'm really I really love this book. It's by Ira Chaliff, and it's called The Courageous Follower. And one of the reasons I just settled on this is because even when you're a leader, you're always going to be a follower as well. And when you're a leader, you've got to help develop those that are following you. So you've got to create an environment that helps you become a better team. So this is a grid that he has in the book where he talks about maps it on one axis of high challenge versus low challenge, and the other axis of low support versus high support. So if you've got someone who is low challenge, so they don't challenge you and they really don't support you, then that individual just functions as a resource. If you have someone who is willing to challenge you, so a follower is willing to challenge you, but really doesn't support you, then they're just functioning in a way that as an individualist. If you've got someone who doesn't challenge you but supports you really well, they're just there to help implement whatever you give them. They're the implementer. And really the sweet spot, the sweet quadrant where we want to function in is this high challenge, high support area where you feel comfortable enough as as a follower to be able to challenge your leader. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. Sorry. You feel comfortable enough challenging, but also you know that they're supporting you. So think about looking at these different characteristics in these 4 quadrants. Does anybody have any comments on that? Do you see yourself in any of these quadrants? Now, these aren't in the same place as they are on the previous one, but focusing really on this partner area. You as a follower, do you see yourself in these areas? Or as a leader, are you cultivating those that are on your team to operate in this partner area? It takes a lot of confidence as a leader to inspire them. Any comments or questions on this?
Dale, I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah, I would
Oh,
say
I'm
that.
just reading the screen.
Yeah, I know for me, especially in this role, and given that we do a lot of partnerships with a lot of external entities, primarily the school district, there's definitely a lot of these different attributes that I see within myself and that you have to have to even make that partnership exist and continue to grow. Maybe not necessarily all of them, but a lot of these attributes definitely are present.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and share since Leslie put me, Johnny, on the spot. I read the slides out loud to myself while I'm on mute. But to contribute to the question, I do see myself in partner, whether I'm a leader or a follower. When I think of myself outside of like leadership at work, like I do not like to confront sensitive issues outside of work, but at work I will do that. Um, and I know I do work to hold myself and others accountable. Maybe that's the registrar in me where it's like I like things that are white and black. And if I don't have to operate in the gray, I can influence the gray. So I would say that I hold myself and others accountable by like, this is what the policy says. And I do work to, have healthy relationships and peer relationships with authority. So I do see myself in that. I can't say I'm a leader out there that's like, this is our like always reinforcing the purpose, always reinforcing the mission. I see myself doing that if I feel like I'm a part of a group or a team where we're constantly deviating from that. And it's easy to get back on track by reiterating the purpose and the mission.
Excellent. Thank you. So yes, this is just, it's so important as you develop as a leader or continue to develop as a leader, and you're thinking about those individuals that you're and wanting to get the best out of them, to be able to allow them that high challenge and find people that are supporting you as well. Because that's where the problem can be. If you have individuals that you don't trust and they're they're challenging you, but you're questioning what the actual motive is of that, then that can be extremely challenging. So let me just talk about, this is a diagram that takes the information on the left-hand side, the follower behavior. This is what Chalif has, having the courage to assume responsibility as a courageous follower, have the courage to serve, have the courage to challenge, have the courage to participate in transformation, and in sometimes even to take what's moral action, which could be, dealing with really difficult situations. On the right-hand side, this is information from those of you who've been through leadership PhD programs and maybe master's programs may recognize Kouzes and Posner. They tend to be pretty strong theorists in the leadership area. And so really looking at what they say the leader should be doing to be effective, and then what Chalif is saying a follower should be doing, and then looking at where those intersect with whether it be listening and then speaking back. So being able to use those two pieces. So I know this doesn't have anything to do with financial aid and enrollment leadership, but I just love this book, and I love trying to bring the more of the information for not just what we were doing, but also from a leadership perspective. I just wanted to sprinkle that one in as well. So any last comments about what we've done tonight? Any questions? Was it helpful?
I just have a quick comment, Tammy. One of my team members, I think, must have attended your presentation at ACRO, because he later came back and we were talking about what to do during one of our team retreats, and ended up sharing like a segment of that presentation. We did a team activity evaluating where we fell within that quadrant. So just wanted, it's funny how things sometimes come full circle, but wanted to share that with you. It was really helpful. I think everyone enjoyed it and we learned a lot, but also talked about some of the dynamics within our own team.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and there is actually an assessment that you can take. You can pay through Chalif. I think it's like $10. You can take the assessment, and you can do that and use that as a team building or a team, just a self-reflection. It's almost like, as much as you invest in the strengths piece, and that's kind of very individualistic what our strengths are, but you can also leverage that. Okay, how do we take those strengths and really create this environment that there's that high the ability to challenge but also support one another in that team environment. So thank you, that's awesome. And I'll share these slides. I'll get these out there so that you can have, if you didn't have time to read all of it or whatever, I'll share the slides so that you can have them. Any other comments? Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
I did want to share that. One, I enjoyed the presentation and I really enjoyed the mini credentialing that we had to do in order to prepare for today. There were things in which it came full circle for me related to understanding why financial aid asks for certain things, also recognizing an opportunity for more conversations and a better partnership. And even though you may feel like, oh, I put this extra nugget in there and it's not related, I feel like there's still like a lot that there's a lot that I can take from that to partner with my financial aid counterpart. And I would say I struggled on I did pass my micro credentialing, but there was information that I wanted to go back and revisit, but it helped with meaning making of our partnership with financial aid and why they need certain things that they need, and reiterated the importance of compliance and so forth. So I really enjoyed that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. One thing I didn't talk about that I'll talk about real fast before I let Jody take over. It has to do with messaging. And this is something I worked really closely when I was over financial aid. I said, I want our communications to be less regulatory and more congratulatory, because our oftentimes from the financial aid area, we think we have to, and sometimes in the registrar's area as well, we think we have to tell them all the regulations and what they have to do to do certain things, and we've got to load them up with that. And so it becomes very almost hostile, and as opposed to saying, hey, congratulations, we want you to come, and here's how we can support you in getting here, and then leaving the regulatory part of that maybe for another conversation, or a face-to-face kind of thing, and follow-up emails. So thinking about at least that initial that initial award notice, let's not throw in all the regulations. Let's make it congratulatory, and we'll do some of the other stuff on the back end to help support them to get through what they need to do to dot all the I's and cross all the T's, but also make them feel welcome and supported and excited about receiving that award from your institution. So I'm going to step back, and we'll go on. We'll kind of, to coin the phrase from Monty Python, and now for something completely different, we will do that again. So thank you so much for your attention, and we'll go on to goal setting.
Tammy, nice segue, not just because you use Monty Python, but to start with something congratulatory. So Tammy and I are starting with some congratulations, which you did your environmental scans. You did great. They were awesome. I know there was a lot of worry there. Like, say goodbye to our coaches have left. That was good. But you did awesome. They were fantastic. I can't say enough. Tammy can't say enough. We're really, really proud of you. This is where it gets a little more fun now, because this is the part where once we get through that piece and all of the analysis, now we get to say, okay, we're dreaming towards a future together for our college, our university. And this is where we get to start to be more creative and start getting into actions and tactics, but that comes later. So very briefly, we're going to go back into our workshop slide deck just to have a quick reminder of what's coming next in terms of your work. So let's bring this up and get it in share here. Oops, there we go. Clicking the wrong one. Okay, so you will recall the work you did to identify the strengths, the opportunities, and perhaps you started to even think aspirationally within your data. But in particular, you were taking the amount of data that we provided you or that you further requested from your IR director, your student affairs VP, all the different people you had to reach out to. And you were able to create some stories. Oh, I just got to let, oh, Gavin's coming in. I'm going to let Gavin in and then actually tell him he can head back out. Hi, Gavin, if you're in the room, I'm just scrolling down. Gavin, we're actually done the first portion and we're moving into the capstone. So coaches usually don't stay for this portion. So we just wrapped up the session, and so you get your evening back if you can hear me. Nice to have you join, but you can actually head back out. You can say hi, bye if you want.
Hey. Good to hear from everyone.
So thank you. We'll see you next time. Okay, so back into the capstone. From your environmental scan, we're going to start working now on what are some of the impactful issues that came to the surface for you out of that analysis you did, looking at your history, where you've been, where you might be going. And so we're going to go back now to think about some of the issues that had emerged. And we're going to start to prioritize some of those issues because we can't tackle it all. But based on your environmental scans, there are some clear things that are bubbling to the surface that really maybe need our attention. There are things that if we say to ourselves, well, you know, we weren't satisfied with the fact that maybe we are seeing some equity gaps in our retention and graduation. And so what are we going to do about that? Right? We're gonna do something about it in the form of starting to think about that as an enrollment and learner success goal. And then from there, we'll get into the real fun stuff, which is starting to put some strategies and tactics around it in order to operationalize the goal. And so the focus then becomes on these real important, almost change agents from the data. And it doesn't mean that we've set aside the data. We'll be going back and forth. This is iterative, as you'll recall us saying many times. So we may need to dip back into the data to say, well, hang on, what else did it say about this? And so even though we've completed a really good environmental scan, both internally, externally, there may be other data that you realize you need. So don't be shy in asking. And there may be other data that you want to rethink and relook at that you already have. And so looking at this from the perspective of, okay, so what are some of the issues that we want to tackle as it pertains to our enrollment and learner success goals? So with that, I'm going to just share my other screen here to show you your workspace, and then I'll give you the links in just one moment. And how did that get so buried on my list here? 1 second. I have to just pop into my, that's why it's buried. All right. So we will be back on to our Miro boards, and there's one for each of the college and the university, so I'll send you the links in just a moment. But wanted to just orient you to where we're at. On the left-hand side of your board, this is your reminder of the 3 components that make up an enrollment and learner success goal. We have to name the enrollment segment. So who is it that we want to have some influence over? Is it first year, first time students? Is it going to be our Hispanic students? Or is it going to be second year students? So you have to determine based on your data, who's the enrollment segment that we're looking to have an impact on. And then what do we know about current state? So this is where we drop back into our data and say, well, we currently know that retention of first year full-time students is currently sitting at 68%. So that's a current state understanding of what we have there. Where do we want to be? What influence do we want to have over that? Do we want to see that at least hold steady? Do we want to see it improve? We obviously don't want to see it go down, but there may be goals where you do want to see a decrease, such as the number of students that go on academic probation. That's an example of maybe a decrease goal. And so those 3 components sit out there as your reminder. But what you're really going to do today is hone in on those strengths and opportunities as you saw them come through your data and start to identify your emerging issues. And so from the environmental scans that you did, what were the things that really stood out for you in terms of, wow, we've got a really good strength here. Let's keep moving that in that direction. Let's keep moving that particular outcome in that direction. Or we noticed a significant opportunity and maybe there's a growth in adult learners in our marketplace and that they are adults with either no credit or credit left on the table. And so that's an opportunity that we could turn into an enrollment or learner success goal. And so this is your sandbox. You get to play here. There's no wrong answers here. It's really just diving back in and reminding ourselves, what did we discover? And starting to put some ideas on the board so that as we work with you further and as you work together as a group, you'll start to see how do we then go back over here and turn that into an actual enrollment or learner success goal. And you'll start to practice writing those. Okay, so I'm going to stop share and ask if there's any questions about that. So today is really just giving you time to go in and work together to start pulling out those issues from your environmental scan. Any questions? Tammy and I are going to drop into your rooms with you.
We also encourage you to take a break. So, if you want to, before you start doing this, maybe take a few minutes break, and because sometimes we just keep going and going. So we want to make sure that we give you time to just step back for a minute, refill your water, whatever, so that you can have a break.
See how well Tammy and I work together. So she's doing a nice job killing time there for me, giving you good advice while I try to get all of the links for you, because that takes me a minute to copy that over. And so here's the university board. There you go. So that'll take you to your two separate boards, and you should all have edit access to drop into there. And as Tammy said, if you want to go into your breakout room, I think they're ready to go, or they will be in a minute when Jonica sets those up. So why don't we wait till we at least get your breakout rooms, and so you can drop in there, and then you can collectively decide, okay, do we want to break now? Do we want to soldier on? There's no timeline. You can use that time as you see fit. If you want to stay in there for the full hour with each other, go for it. If you feel like you get a good stab at it for half an hour and you want to give yourselves some time to relax after that, that's totally your time. We try to give you this time so that you don't have to always regroup when you're back in your jobs later on. So I don't see, I'm going to create the two breakout rooms. So give me a second here. So hang on, it's automatically assigned. Is this right? No, it's randomly assigned that. So let me kill that. We don't want random assignments. Recreate. I'm
That
going to,
participants.
yeah, I just have to assign manually. So just 1 second, I'll let you all choose. So room 1 will be the college group. Room 2 is going to be the university room. So go to room 1 if you are college, ascend, and go to room 2 if you're the university, ascend. And I'm going to stop the recording as